Welcome to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. Ring of Fire Radio has been on the air for nearly a decade, and in that time we've talked to the best and the brightest that the progressive community has to offer. This week we'll be taking a look at some of the best interviews we've conducted over the years, stories that corporate media wouldn't touch. So please enjoy, and remember that you can catch Ring of Fire Radio every weekend. But right now, just remember, you just now stepped into the Ring of Fire.
You can't change Washington from the inside. You can only change it from the outside.
Grand jury secrecy rules.
For political gain.
The press can find out.
That has nothing to do with politics, but go ahead.
It wouldn't bother me.
Oops.
So, Pap, and of course, one of the big stories this week, it's really stunning, and I guess this he actually came out towards around Thanksgiving, but we didn't have a chance to talk about this. The relatively new Pope came out with one of the most powerful critiques of modern capitalism that we see by any sort of, I guess, establishment figure in the world.
Yeah, it almost makes me want to become Catholic. I mean, you know.
Well, I'll tell you something. I want to just read a couple of quotes because this is really impressive stuff. He says, "We can only praise the steps being taken to improve people's welfare in areas such as healthcare, education, and communications. At the same time, we have to remember that the majority of our contemporaries are barely living from day to day with dire consequences." He wrote, "Just as the commandment, 'Thou shalt not kill,' sets a clear limit in order to safeguard the value of human life, today we also have to say, 'Thou shalt not,' to an economy of exclusion and inequality. Such economy kills." This is really impressive stuff.
It is. I'm just so glad to hear it. You know, here's the competing interest here. The very fact that you had the last pope that resigned. Okay, now understand, he hasn't left the Vatican. He's there in the Vatican, living in an arm of the Vatican. Now, you know, when a pope dies, then their theology, their politics, their social views dies with them. But here you have a very conservative pope, you know, the last guy. He's there in the Vatican, and you have this emerging pope that is very liberal. Now, that is a very unusual situation, Sam. You have, you know, it's almost like these two popes meeting head on in their ideology. You put the ideology of these two popes together, and it's like oil and water. So I think what's going to happen with this guy is he goes forward and he gives important discussions. He puts important statements out there like that. You're going to have an arm of the Vatican that goes with the old guy, the guy who retired because there were so many damn barnacles on him, he had to retire. So I'm interested to see as this goes forward, this division that we're going to start seeing. I promise you are. This guy's very much alive. You know, they look at popes in a very different kind of way. I mean, he's not dead. He's still out there, and he has a hell of a following there in the Vatican, in the Catholic Church. And I think the more this guy, you know, the more new pope gets out there and talks about issues like this, we're going to start seeing a real serious divide in the Catholic Church. And I hope this guy will have courage to stick it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because, of course, you know, in many respects, he's simply saying that we have, as a church, have spent far too much time sort of prioritizing what we consider sins on, you know, in terms of like homosexuality or in terms of contraception. And he is beginning to talk about the teachings of Jesus, and in terms of sort of the social responsibility.
The Beatitudes, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
What's also fascinating to me about this is the way that it's been received by the right wing in this country. You had Rush Limbaugh coming out and saying that Pope Francis is spouting pure Marxism.
Yeah,
he says
no
that
question.
the Pope, it's sad because this Pope makes it very clear he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to capitalism and socialism.
See, that's my point, Sam. The old German, though, the old German Pope, that was really a pretty disgusting character, he's still alive. He's still and that's what I'm saying. It's very unusual to have they think of this guy as being, you know, ordained by God. Even he might have resigned, but in their mind, some are such fanatics that they still line up around the old German guy, who was just the opposite of this very progressive new pope. And so you're going to start seeing the very fact that you have, the big bag of wind talking about it, Rush Limbaugh. I mean, the OxyContin kid. He's out there talking about it. He is like the leading edge of what you're going to start seeing with the Catholic Church more and more. You're going to start seeing a real division because of the fact that you really have two popes there right now.
Yeah, you had on WorldNet Daily, this Tea Party activist said that Jesus is weeping because of what the Pope says.
Right.
And I will also say that, it's no surprise to me that late last week we heard this faked up, this trumped up controversy about the U.S. government supposedly closing down its embassy in the Vatican when in fact they were just moving it.
Yeah.
But this to me, I think this is one of the biggest underreported stories.
It's a huge story, Sam.
This is huge. But what I think is really clear is that the Republican Party is very concerned about this because and I think the reason why they ginned up this whole fake controversy was to muddy the waters, to obscure the fact that this Pope has come out with an 85-page document that is talking about the evils of capitalism,
right,
that is saying it's sinful
right,
to do things like the Paul Ryan budget, frankly.
Well, that's right. But see, Sam, I think we're going to be reporting on this as the year goes through 2014. Definitely. And my prediction is what you're going to see. Now, the old German Pope will never come out and say anything. But his followers, his minions that didn't want him to step down, they were the people that said, yeah, no matter how disgusting your conduct is, hang in there. Because this two-pope division really has some potential to go bad.
It's going to be fascinating. I mean, I don't know enough about the Catholic hierarchy.
Well, I'm not a Catholic either, but I read enough to understand that this division right now, that we're just seeing the edges of it right now, and we're going to see more from the old German,
And just, your point about 2014, we're going to hear a lot more about this, but one has to wonder that, we hear all this talk about the so-called Reagan Democrats, which was a phenomena that was, I think, largely made up in many respects.
Right.
But when you talk about the Catholic population in this country, when you talk about the white working class, this is a group that the Republican Party has always courted, has always used a lot of their things like attacking choice and homosexuality to drive people to the polls. And if you've got a pope, and these people are being cued by their Catholic beliefs, if you've got a pope who's coming out there saying that, like, look, when you look out at the world, you should be seeing the evils of something like cutting people's health care and about income inequality as being as prominent, if not more prominent, than those other cues that you have responded to through the years. This could very well have a serious implication. So I think it's
Sam, before you get, you mentioned Ronald Reagan, I don't know if you saw that Ford O'Connell, he used to work for McCain. He came out with if Republicans want to win the White, this is his talking about, if you guys want to win the White House in 2016, then you need to get away from your obsessive Reagan disorder. He basically it is, hey guys, Reagan is frigging dead. He's dead still. He's going to be dead tomorrow, and you're dying with Reagan. I think the new book is Hail Mary. Something like the 10-step playbook for Republican recovery, something like that. And the whole story is Ronald Reagan is dead. He was good for us at a time, but you old codgers need to let it go, or you're going to die too. That was
the real problem is that the Republican Party hasn't had a new idea since Reagan passed away, and
that wasn't even a new idea.
Right. And back in 2008, I was up in New Hampshire doing some videos, and I was asking people, of all the people on the ballot, who would you rather vote for? These living people or Ronald Reagan? And they all said Ronald Reagan because, look, they are married to a mythical Ronald Reagan, and they have an incredible lack of awareness of what his policies actually were in many respects.
When you're old and feeble, it's easy to love Ronald Reagan.
So, Pap, when we broke, we were talking about the right-wing freak-out that I think we're seeing in this country, and I think for them it's got a lot of political implications as to the message that was put out by the Pope just about a week and a half ago. It went so far as that they the right wing in this country trumped up some fake scandal about the U.S. Embassy in the Vatican, because I think they're genuinely afraid of this. And, we were just
How
talking.
about this story about him? This is really going to freak him out. This story that's developing about, is the Pope freaking? Is he sneaking out of the Vatican at night, giving money to the homeless? I mean, this story's out there. I mean, this guy is a true believer in the Beatitudes, and that flies in the face of John Stossel. Did you see this, John Stossel?
I did. This was
report that.
Well, I'll tell you, this was, John Stossel is supposedly a libertarian, whatever that means.
Oh,
these days.
he's a right wing nut.
Right, of
That's
course.
all it is.
And he's on
libertarian.
Fox and Friends, and this is following his going on there and bemoaning the fact that we're giving health care to poor people. And he says, I got Medicare and I'm loving that, but, I paid into it. So for John Stossel, of course, it's okay for him to get Medicare, but when you give other people some type of health insurance, that's a problem.
Well, this is what the idiot did. I mean, he put on a fake beard, and he sat down on the sidewalk with a cardboard sign
in New York City.
In New York City, and he said, "I made so much money. I would have made." I could have made $90 if I'd have stuck out. Well, no, you made $23, or something like that. It was just. But the point is, he goes on and he chastises the homeless. Not only that, he chastises people who give to the homeless. Basically, remarking that we're stupid and that anybody that really cares about that is just doing them harm. It's harming capitalism.
He's arguing. Well, first off, he's arguing a couple things at the same time, because, of course, this is all just to gin up this notion amongst the Fox viewers that, when you see people who are homeless on the street, you should not have a reaction that causes you to have any sympathy or empathy for these people. He's saying most of them are probably scammers. I mean, look, it is, as I sit here talking to you, it is, freezing cold in New York City. You see people on the streets and homeless, in New York City. Michael Bloomberg's policies were disastrous for the homeless in this city. And the idea that people would be out there faking, that they would be so desperate that they would be out there scamming in some way to make whatever it was, $30 a day or something, is just absurd.
A day less.
It's just absurd.
So here it is. I mean, let's see. What is an apartment in Manhattan? $2,000-$3,000?
Indeed.
So Stossel says how patently wrong it is for you idiots, you stupid liberals, to be giving money to people who are holding up signs saying that they don't have a place to live. Truthfully, I'm sure when I walk through the streets up there that, the money I'm handing out, it doesn't all go where it's supposed to go. Who cares? John Stossel dresses up
well,
like
I also got news for you. When you go
Santa Claus?
When you go and you invest with a banker in New York City, I can also assure you that the money's not going where they say it is half the time.
No,
I mean, look, the bottom line is, of course, there's going to be
you're better off giving you're better off giving to somebody homeless on the street than you are giving to a Wall Street banker.
But this
nowadays.
is all part and parcel, Pap, of just an unrelenting war on the poor in this country, on those who are in the bottom half of the income distribution in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, look at one of the things, and we're speaking at a time where this past week we're starting to see healthcare.gov function the way that it's supposed to function. It's not there totally. You and I have been critics of the public-private nature of the Affordable Care Act in the past, but one of the things that has been is an unmitigated success has been enrollment in Medicaid. There's no questions asked there. You're getting millions of people who are given health insurance for the first time through Medicaid. It would be a lot more if you didn't have Republican governors who have made the decision not to accept the free Medicaid that they're getting from the federal government for the first 3 years, and then subsidized to the tune of 90%. But in California, you actually have the Republican Assembly members there. The California Republicans, they have put up, I mean, if you can believe this, they sent out mailers on the taxpayer dime. They have built a fake California health exchange site. They are so afraid of the success of the Affordable Care Act in California, they have put up a fake site to basically screw over people who come there, to deny people this health insurance. I was watching on Fox News the other day. You had one of these town hall folks saying that Obama's trying to infantilize the American people by
Right.
allowing 26-year-olds to stay on their parents' health care plans. I mean, this is just unmitigated attacks on people.
Yeah, it is. Of course, it's happening in the Supreme. There's kind of a multi-level attack, Sam. What's happening state to state, they're trying to dismantle the health care initiatives as much as they can. They just completely, ACA, they're just trying to dismantle by fraud. That's what you're describing as fraud, where they make stuff up, they create these sites. In the Supreme Court, you know the story. The Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court has accepted the Hobby Lobby case. This is a private business. Now understand, it's a private business that the Supreme Court has said we're going to review in terms of the relief we give to religious organizations. First time it's ever happened in the Supreme Court where they're going to treat a private individual, a business, the same way that we would when we review the actions taken against a church. Now
we should just remind people this is about the mandate in that insurance companies must provide contraceptive care for women.
Right.
And
right.
it comes at no cost to Hobby Lobby. The insurance companies will pick up the tab because at the end of the day, they know that it actually makes business sense for them to do it anyway.
Sure. Dave, you know, the article that you wrote, Racism Ended When, it's just another Dave Zirin quality article that analyzes the thing like having that white elephant sitting in the room and not understanding there's an elephant there, not wanting to talk about it. You know, Dave, the question used to come up, and it still comes up from time to time, and that is a lot of people, especially people who follow the history of football down here, SEC-type football, the question comes up, why is it that these African-American kids play for places like Alabama and Mississippi and Auburn and, you know, all these states that just, you know, a generation ago they were lynching people, you know, they were blowing up churches. You had to sit in back of the bus. In the worst places that this was being generated were places like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. And it's almost like that is not even considered nowadays. But
it's such a good question, and there are a lot of ways to go after this answer, and of course a lot of the stories are very individual, but it really comes down to a couple of factors. I mean, first and foremost, we have to realize that the Southeast and Texas, of course, but really the Southeast is the mecca of young football player development in the United States. And there are reasons for that. I once talked to a coach from Louisiana, and he put it in a very pithy way. He said, look, when you have structural racism and year-round sunshine, you have the perfect soil to create pro athletes, particularly football players. So first of all, this is where the best athletes are coming from. Second of all, because they grow up very poor, the idea of being close to home has a huge pull for them. Like if you're growing up in rural Florida Panhandle, the idea of going to USC, I mean, you might as well say, you know, you're going to go to Beijing. I mean, you have to realize how scary this is, not just for the kids, but for the families to venture that far away from home. And then the next reason, too, is I've interviewed a lot of, you know, African-American families who've gone through the recruiting process. And for a lot of them, they know the history, and it's kind of a point of pride to say, yeah, this was the place where Bear Bryant used to say we weren't allowed to go, and now we're walking right in. And you know,
well, your article, Dave, your article, again, I can't tell you how well written it was, how precise it was. And you live in D.C. I live in the middle of what you're talking about. So for me to say that, believe me, I've analyzed this for years. You point something out, it's so obvious. Yeah, let's take the Auburn-Alabama game. There you have, it's almost like, you know, your African-American kids are playing our African-American kids, these great, incredibly talented football players. Now, up in the stands is almost an exclusively all-white bunch of college kids, all right?
Yeah.
The game is played, and the animosity that's generated out of that is so horrendous that you actually had a situation where a mother of 3 in Alabama was shot and killed by another woman who was upset that college football fan didn't get upset enough about the Alabama loss. So she shot her in the damn parking lot.
Right.
This is the quality of how crazy football is. Take it from there. Just give me the 10,000 view of what you see.
Sure. I mean, first of all, Birmingham, Alabama, this Auburn-Alabama game, got an 82 share. Now that's not a number that should even exist in the 21st century. An 82 share means 82% of all households that were watching TV were watching this game in the city of Birmingham. I mean, that is nuts when you consider things like the fact that we have 500 channels and social media and kids have video games and all the rest of it. This was what everybody was doing that day. And the crazy thing about it is that this is starting to be built for export. I mean, the ratings for this game were up 291% than the ratings a year ago. And so there's a way in which that kind of obsession, that kind of excitement, that kind of energy has the capacity to, frankly, become viral and become the sort of thing where everybody wants to get a little piece of it.
Dave, the talking point down here by people who observe it is, and this is, I mean, it sounds horrendously ugly, but it is just, this is not my talking point, but you hear this again and again from people who are non-Auburn, non-Alabama fans, and that is Alabama doesn't have a whole hell of a lot to talk about when you take football away. I mean, if you've ever been there, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, virtually.
I've been.
Yeah, okay. So
I've been. That's a huge part of it. I mean, you don't have the professional teams in the same kind of way. I mean, it is college football country, and it has a long and storied tradition that makes people feel like they have a real sense of belonging with that tradition. You know, the same way people where I live, near in Baltimore, people are huge Baltimore Ravens fans, but with not nearly the kind of intensity and the kind of buy-in that you see down there in the Southeast. I mean, it is really, really intense. You mentioned the killing that took place. I mean, also the fights that broke out, things like that. I mean,
well, how about with Alabama?
You're going to love this. Someone at Alabama has even started a Change.org petition where he is trying to get the overtime played in that game, saying that Chris Davis, who ran back the field goal for the winning score, stepped out of bounds. He's trying to actually mount a political campaign to get them to do a do-over on the game.
Dave, remember the article? I know you reported on it. A fella from Alabama. By the way, this is the typical Alabama fan. Let me describe it. They didn't go to Alabama. A lot of them, most of them didn't even go to college anywhere. So this Alabama fan, similarly situated, drives down to Auburn and poisons a dozen historical trees that have been there for 200 years, poisons them because he's so damn mad that Auburn got a break on something that they shouldn't have in his mind. Now, with that mentality, it's hard if you're listening to this show in L.A. or, let's say D.C., they can't even understand what a lack of introspection, as you point out in your article, what a lack of introspection on behalf of everybody down here really is engaged in. It's almost like we're ignoring how insane this has become. It truly is the Confederacy of the dunces. Let's go to Tallahassee. Tell us the story in Tallahassee.
And this is the thing about it that I think the racial politics of this need to be talked about, because I know as you talk about on your show, there are all kinds of things that are happening right now, particularly in the Southeast, that ever since the Voting Rights Act was destroyed, that are actually preventing the franchise for African American voters. I mean, all kinds of it's like Dixie, the return of Dixie, like trying to keep.
But they
African Americans
still go to college there, Dave. They still look. They're trying to take away their votes. They're trying to take away some fundamental rights to take us back to pre-Rosa Parks, and they still friggin' sign up to play at Alabama or Auburn, and it's these white kids up in the stand watching their African American.
That's what's so crazy, though, the hero worship thing, and that's one of the things I wrote in the article is let's not confuse iconography with progress. Let's not confuse the fact that in Bear Bryant's day, you didn't have African Americans on the field, and now that you do, that this somehow means that it's a new South. Now, iconography is not the same thing as progress. In Florida State, you asked about Tallahassee. This is a great example of that. They have an amazing redshirt freshman quarterback named Jameis Winston. By all accounts, he should win the Heisman Trophy and be leading Florida State to the national championship game. Yet there is this cloud that's hanging over his head, and that's a one-year-long investigation into whether or not he raped somebody. Now, Jameis Winston is African-American. I'm not going to comment on his guilt or innocence. Let's see if charges get brought. But I do find two things about this case fascinating. The first is the way the Tallahassee community has rallied around him and are just pillorying this young woman for coming forward with any kinds of charges.
Which let me make this clear, Dave. This is the Deep South. Tallahassee is the Deep South. This is not like the rest of Florida. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Right. No, I'm very glad you said that because a lot of people don't always understand that there are two Floridas in that way. But the part that
this is the honey boo boo Florida. But go ahead.
People also got to realize that one of the legacies of the South, and this is what first brought Rosa Parks herself to Montgomery, Alabama, was the way in which African-American men would be lynched and killed if they were ever accused of sexual assault, particularly of white women. And oftentimes, if they were just in a relationship with white women, there would be trumped-up charges. I mean, the Scottsboro Boys case from the 1930s, which was one of the first things that Rosa Parks ever did as an organizer, was raise money to defend the Scottsboro Boys. And I kept wondering when I wrote the article, what the heck would Rosa Parks say about a South where you have, just because he's good at football, you have this huge white community rallying around this quarterback and sending this woman out into the public square, to the social media public square, to be stoned for daring to raise any aspersion on his character. I mean, people keep in mind, remember, Bible Belt, like you said, Tallahassee. I got to tell you, one of the most popular signs when Jameis Winston plays, it says, "God bless Jameis Christ."
Right, I know. Listen, I want to pick up with that. This story's even worse than that. Again, we're talking about Tallahassee, Florida. It is not. It is the Deep South. Make no mistake about it. It is absolutely the Deep South. It has nothing to do with the rest of the state. We'll be right back. Let's continue that conversation, Dave. Dave, before the break, we were talking about, the case. Young woman is actually, just completely victimized. There's no other way to put it, because Winston, Winston is charged with raping her. Now, rather than asking the question, what happened, the Tallahassee police, first of all, the police detective, tells the young woman who was raped or allegedly raped, don't press charges, because if you do, this is really going to be bad.
Very difficult for you.
Okay, so pick it up from there. How involved is this football community with saying we're going to ignore these types of things? And it's not. Let me just tell you something. It's not just this case. It's where Tallahassee, if you remember, had more felons. They had more felons playing on the field than I think any college football team in the country. But this
was notorious. Bobby Bowden, the former coach of the team, when he was in charge, notorious that the police officers would look the other way. Notorious that they basically had run of the town, could do whatever they wanted. And if there were any charges brought, the first call would go to Bobby Bowden, not to the police. You
bring up coaches. How did Saban, in your estimation, Saban's in front of the camera? Now, understand, the kicker who missed, this is a freshman, understand. Yeah. He's in the game a matter of seconds. He hasn't played the game at all. He's brought in for Alabama to kick this
third kick of the season.
57 yards. Seems like impossible. He puts it up in the air, does everything he's supposed to do. Frankly, another few yards, he would have made it. Saban, and then after the game, the guy receives death threats. They actually have sites where they created, let's hate this guy. Basically they're clearly death threats. Now, Saban, rather than doing what coach with character would do in defending this guy. How do you think he handled it?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I felt like I was actually smelling the stenching, rotting soul of Nick Saban through my television when he was talking. I mean, this is a 62-year-old man. He is charged with the mentoring of a whole group of people between the ages of 19 and 22. And in the press conference afterwards, threw him right under the bus. What did he say about the kicker you mentioned? He said, well, he was kicking him from 60 yards in practice. He just didn't hit it good. And that's ridiculous.
And then his main kicker, they focused on the main kicker too. They go after the main kicker. How does he handle his senior kicker received death threats as well?
Yep, because he missed a couple of field goals in the game as well. And Nick Saban wasn't kind to him either. I mean, Nick Saban wouldn't even take responsibility for the terrible decision that he made in even trying that field goal in the first place and not just waiting for overtime. And then keep in mind, he didn't have anybody on the field during that 108-yard return who was equipped to tackle Chris Davis, the player for Auburn, with the speed. He had all linemen in there to prevent a blocked field goal. So it was really a fault of coaching. Yet when asked about that, he was like, no, we had people out there who could have tackled him. We set it up in the game. And we set it up in practice. We practiced for this. And I just could not believe that he wasn't shouldering this for these kids, that he wasn't standing in front of them, in front of the state of Alabama saying, hey, I've given you 2 national championships the last couple of years. You mad at somebody, be mad at me. That's what he should have done. I'm 62 years old. I make $5.5 million a year. I make as much as, God, I worked it out on my computer, like 187 school teachers in the state of Alabama. and so it's like he should have stood up there and actually taken the weight. And he went out of his way to not take the weight. And it makes me wonder.
Let me ask you this.
Let me
ask you this. You raised it in your article. You do a good job raising it in your article. You talk about, we try to use this notion that, hey, look, we've got all these African-American players out there. We have a black president, African-American president. The Republican talking point, and certainly the talking point in the South, is racism is dead. What do you make of that?
Sure. Well, it's absolutely ridiculous and outrageous. I mean, if you look at what racism is, which is a structural problem, and if you look at the ways it actually affects people in terms of access to health care, what happens when they go in front of a judge if they get arrested, arrest rates, if you look at things like that, sentencing, the things that really destroy the lives of working people in this country, then what you see quite clearly is that racism is alive and well. And if we don't address it and look at it openly and stop looking at symbolism as a way to say, well, racism, it doesn't exist anymore, then we're never going to address the problems and we're never going to make them better.
Yeah, okay. So to me, where this story, there's so many parts to the story that you've written, and it's so well done. It's almost like you were raised down here. I was raised down here, and you got it right.
My mom in Florida.
Okay. So you come back to the real issue here. It comes down to this metaphor. I mean, it's Alabama versus Auburn. It is the game, the most important game. It is, as you pointed out, they had an 82% market share, mind-boggling, as you say, watching this game. And the reason that is because these two teams have so much invested in their identity as football, and that's it. I mean, if you take football away from either of those schools, what are you left with? You've lived down here. I can tell you're left with nothing. You're left with nothing for them to really embrace and be proud of. But when it gets to the point to where you have a mother of 3 shot and killed by another woman in a parking lot because she didn't believe the victim was showing enough remorse about the loss of this game. When it gets to that point, isn't it kind of time for a reality check down there in the South?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a time for a reality check on a number of fronts throughout the sports world. I mean, we just passed the 1-year anniversary of when Kansas City football player Javon Belcher shot and killed the mother of his child and then took his own life in front of his coach, Romeo Crennel, and his general manager, Scott Pioli. I mean, if that didn't cause a reality check in the National Football League about issues like mental health, for example, it's hard to imagine that this will be seen as anything other than a blip. But this is more the mental health of the fans, and I just hope you'll keep writing about it. It needs to be talked about because Dave, it's got so many parts, it's got so many moving parts that we don't even talk about. And fortunately, your article, "Racism Ended When?" in Nation, I mean, it's just as good as I've ever seen. Thank you for joining me, okay?
President Obama wants to fast-track approval of the TPP, which is a massive giveaway to corporations looking to skirt the law. There's a growing coalition of members of Congress from both sides of the political aisle that want to abort the project. And if you even have a little bit of information about this, you want this thing aborted as well. The only person who doesn't seem to want it to go away is the president. And it all has to do, as we've talked about so many times, is you have to follow the money, and this money goes to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Wall Street and Robert Rubin and Pritzker and all that money that has put and propped up the Democrats virtually through the Clinton administration and now through the Obama administration. I have Lori Wallach. She's the director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. Lori, there's so many things that should scare the hell out of anybody listening to this. What are the things that really, really should scare us the most?
It's hard to pick a one, to be honest.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's sort of a smorgasbord of badness.
Mm-hmm.
The agreement isn't about trade. It's just misbranded that way, I guess, to try and sell it. There are 29 chapters, and only 5 of them have to do with trade. So let's just test out with the listeners what they think is, the most barbarous, dangerous, and undermining.
Okay, let it roll.
There's a whole chapter, that's the one that just leaked, that would jack up medicine prices by extending Big Pharma's monopoly patents. That chapter would also help big content, Disney and company, make us pay for every click on the Internet and get us knocked off. A lot of the stuff that was in SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, that activism in Congress tanked last year, is stuck in through the back door of the copyright provisions of SOPA. So less Internet freedom, more expensive medicine. There's another chapter that actually has a bigger and badder version of the foreign investor rules that were in NAFTA that actually incentivize offshoring of U.S. jobs, both manufacturing and services, to lower wage countries. And this agreement has Vietnam, which, is the lower wage offshoring alternative to even China. No labor unions, wages of less than $1 a day, etc. The investor provisions also would expose the U.S. government to attacks by foreign investors skirting our laws in courts and dragging our government in front of foreign tribunals staffed by 3 trade attorneys who would have the power to impose unlimited fines paid by the taxpayer.
Okay,
let me government action.
Look, Laura, we could go on forever. Look, what this is about, let me drill down. It's not about trade. It is about trying to deregulate the United States, take away worker protections that they can't get to through our legislation. It's about them trying to reconstruct our civil justice process because they didn't get enough in their big tort reform lies. Oddly enough, that most people listening to this believed that, lawyers were causing prices to go up. They did such a great job selling that, but it wasn't quite good enough because jurors now have figured out that it was a lie. Most people figured out that the tort reform issue was a lie. So now they go and they say, well, let's go at it a different way. This is not about trade, and you started off with the same line that I like to start off with, and that is it's about deregulating and removing the sovereignty of our countries to where we don't have choices anymore. You saw the article, this last week where you got oil companies suing the folks in Canada for $250 million because they won't let them frack up there. The people said, no, we don't want you fracking up here. We think it's dangerous. We know you're poisoning the aquifer down south there. We know you're doing that in Pennsylvania. You're poisoning the aquifer to people are drinking toxins from your fracking. So we want to we don't want to do that. But then, so they sue them for $250 million. They bring in all these smart boy Harvard, Yale lawyers, silk suit lawyers out of Washington, out of the Beltway. They pay those lawyers $2,000 an hour to scare the hell out of everybody because they have a vehicle to do that already with NAFTA. And now add to it SHAFTA, or better known as TPP, and we see where we're headed, don't we?
Well, the thing is, that is all true and accurate. And the thing about it is, this is the kind of attack on our basic rights and needs. And, it's as much about deregulating what we rely on, safeguards, but it's really kind of about corporations regulating governments. putting governments in handcuffs and saying, you will now do what we want, not what people through their democracy demand. Because these rules, were they to go into place, cannot be changed, not one comma, unless all 12 of the countries agree.
Why has the president held this so secretly? Why has he made people sign agreements that they wouldn't disclose what the discussion was, that they could be prosecuted if they did? Why has he put this under classified kind of negotiation the same way he would something like with the Pentagon or the CIA? Why has he done that? I mean, what I know the answer, but it's a rhetorical question. What's your thought?
Well, actually, I think the top U.S. trade official, Ron Kirk, said it the best last year when in a moment of candor he revealed, well, the last time we made one of these kind of agreements public, we couldn't actually end up signing the dang thing.
Yeah.
Which is to say, if the public knows what's in it, the thing is going to be dead on arrival. And in fact, Senator Warren, after the trade representative said that, said, well, seems to me, if you can't sign an agreement if the public knows what's in it, then you shouldn't sign that kind of an agreement.
Let me tell you something might scare you a little bit. Hey, Scott, play cut 7. Now, this is Hillary Clinton. She talks about this it's a veiled shot at isolationism. But really, Hillary is getting ready to make the idea of isolationism in the United States being bad, and then she's going to springboard it in to the TPP is good. Because what the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Wall Street understand is they only have a short period of time with this president. Obama, they got to get it done through Obama, because Obama owes them so damn much. I mean, he just owes them so much. So now they say, okay, well, let's work on Hillary. Well, they started working on Hillary. Play cut 7. It's about Rand Paul, but listen to what she's saying.
I hear all this talk about how we need to withdraw from the world. I've heard even tonight some references to the really unfortunate consequences of sequester and budget cuts. We have to decide if we intend to continue America's global leadership.
Okay, you know what that is, Lori. That is, she's getting ready to go ahead and pick up the mantle. She's getting ready to run for president. The money's already rolling into her. It's now, Obama's less important, except if they think they can get this through with Obama by doing the fast track that they're doing, and do it in secret, and do it where media doesn't know about it, and do it where Obama can sell it as another great idea, then they're fine. But they don't think they can accomplish that, so they know Hillary's going to run, and they're getting her ready. I mean, there is zero question in my mind about this. Look, she comes from Bill Clinton years, for God's sakes. He invented NAFTA. After Ronald Reagan, of course, gave him the precursors of a NAFTA and CAFTA. But isn't that where this is going, or am I seeing too much here?
Well, I think it's worth keeping an eye on what Hillary Clinton is saying, but actually we got much more immediate problems, which is next week in Salt Lake City is going to be what's supposed to be the last round of TPP negotiations, because the Obama administration wants to sign this deal by the end of the year. Now, the only way it doesn't get signed is if everyone who's listening to this participates in what we could call the Dracula strategy. We got to drag this sucker out into the sunshine. It cannot survive the scrutiny of public sunshine. As exactly you said, when people find out about this, their hair ignites on fire.
Okay, so who do they write? What do they do? This. Let me just tell you, this is the line in the sand, man. This is the thing that will. I mean, I don't know why nobody's telling Obama this. It's going to define his legacy, and it ain't going to be pretty. But so what do people? How do we save Obama from himself? What do we do?
All right. There are two very specific things we all can do, and it will make a difference. First of all, we need to tell everyone we know about the TPP and its dangers, and it's such a big set of dangers. If you care about food safety or GMOs or organics, this is going to ruin you. If you care about access to affordable medicine, this is going to ruin you. If you care about financial regulation, there's a rollback of the financial reforms. If you care about buy local, buy American, it's banned in this agreement. You name the issue. You care about climate, energy, stopping fracking, it's banned in this agreement to stop fracking. So how about
if you agree with the idea that we ought to be able to try cases in the United States according to U.S. laws rather than having to try cases on
Tribunal kangaroo courts?
Yeah, and we know what that is. They're packed with industry hacks, industry thugs. We've seen it in arbitration already. Right now, look at the cases coming out of Alabama where you have arbitration up there, and the Supreme Court is so dead brain up there that there's a case before them right now where the arbitrators were shown clearly, without question, to have actually worked and gotten money from the people that they're supposed to be impartially arbitrating with, never disclosed it, hit the consumer for a bunch of money, and in the end, the U.S. Supreme Court says, yeah, that's fine. So what's going to happen with this? This is on steroids.
Well, here's how we're going to stop it. Go to www.exposethetpp.org. That's www.exposethetpp.org. You will find there really accessible one-pagers on all these issues of how TPP will affect your life. Whatever motivates you and whatever is going to have the most effect on your friends and family, share that piece. Everybody needs to make sure that their member of the House of Representatives and their 2 senators commit to them just not to give away their constitutional trade authority. You don't even have to get them to do something good. You just got to make sure they don't give away what they got.
Okay, can Congress stop this after the president signs it? Because he's dying to sign it. He has to pay. He's got to pay Wall Street back. So go ahead.
The answer is yes, sir. Congress can stop it, which means we can make Congress stop it. But it'll be very, very hard to do so if they agree to a thing called fast track. Now, under the U.S. Constitution, the founders put all the authority on trade in Congress. That's great. No trade agreement can go into effect unless Congress approves. In comes Richard Nixon. He comes up with this incredible procedure to grab up some of that power and some of Congress's law-writing power, too. Fast track, it's called.
Yeah.
1973. It's only been used 16 times. That's how we got NAFTA and WTO. And here's what it does. It delegates away Congress's exclusive rights over trade and Congress's legislation writing authority to the executive branch.
Amazing.
So the executive branch can
Absolutely
unilaterally go pick out trade partners, negotiate an agreement,
what does this
decide
do?
the content,
What does this do
sign
to
the content,
Well, okay,
write the legislation,
Lori,
and ram it through Congress.
Lori, he signed. Let's say the president wants to sign it. He's dying to sign it. He will sign it given the chance, again, because it's payback
Doesn't
time.
mean anything if he signs it without authority.
Hang on just a
Unless
second.
Congress has delegated the authority,
Lori,
it's like signing it on toilet paper.
Let me ask you some questions, okay? Hold on. Okay, so after he signs it, what happens next in the technical layout of the process? What happens next?
If Congress has preserved its authority, has not given it away, because they'd have to do a specific vote in advance to give away that authority in fast track. If they've preserved their authority, then it comes back to Congress, and Congress can decide if they agree. And if they don't, they can send it back to be changed.
The Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments on a case that's been described as Citizens United on steroids. If the conservative court sides with big business on this case, the floodgates, unlimited corporate campaign money is just going to be staggering, even more than it is now. And that's part of what we've been talking about. The way that corporate America has now owned the United States is because they have so much money to spread around. And Democrats are no longer Democrats in many instances because they're moving with the money. They're moving with the money. You even have to taking Wall Street money and changing politics that way. Of course, Republicans, you have Republicans leaving the Republican Party, dressing up like Democrats, and because it's like, rats jumping off a ship, but they then turn into Democrats, Wall Street Democrats, and they accomplish the same agenda they had before when they were Republicans. I've got Fang with me. He's investigative journalist with The Nation, superb writer. Lee, tell us about McCutcheon. A lot of people don't even know about it.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for having me. Sean McCutcheon is an Alabama businessman, a frequent GOP donor, and he has been donating to candidates over the years, and what he would like to do is challenge the FEC cap on aggregate campaign limits. That cap basically says every 2 years you can only donate to a maximum amount of $123,000 to all the different candidates and political parties, and that cap has been in place for about 30 years. It's indexed to inflation, but it's been there because it creates a limit so one donor doesn't just give to an unlimited number of campaign committees and circumvent that individual limit that exists. You can only give so many dollars, $5,000 or $15,000 to an individual candidate.
What's the net effect of this? Cut right to it. Case of Buckley v. Vallejo, very important case, 1976. Supreme Court made a decision where, by golly, we're going to control money in the political process. How does this turn that up on its head?
That's right. So, after the Watergate era, we had these campaign finance laws, and this is the next chisel against them. So if this case is successful, number one, an individual candidate can go to a donor and solicit $1 million campaign check. It'll be filtered through maybe dozens of dummy campaign accounts, but that's the net effect here, that individual candidates will have to beg wealthy donors for $1 million checks, multi-million-dollar checks. Right now, we have a system. It's a bad system, but candidate committees, the ones that the candidates actually control, they have limits. But, as you know, and you've talked about on your show many times, there are these super PACs and these independent expenditure committees that already have no limits. That's already been achieved by the Roberts Court. This McCutcheon case would push it further into the deregulatory realm and allow candidates themselves to solicit these multi-million-dollar checks.
You want to hear sick irony? It's just it's almost dark humor. But what's happened now is the court has given this unlimited money to the party of choice, basically. Now, they thought that the Republican Party was the party of choice until the teabaggers came on the scene. But now you have big donors saying, hell no, I'm not going to be associated with this thing called the GOP Tea Party. I'm not going to do it. So what ends up happening is Democrats then Republicans move away from the party. They dress up like Democrats, and they run as Democrats. And you get people like Manchin in West Virginia and, people like that are anything but Democrats. But they do all the bidding of Wall Street. So there's a party shift that takes place, okay? You have basically the have-nots in this country that still believe that because of social issues, whether it's immigration, same-sex marriage, whatever it may be, because of social issues, they feel more akin to what's going on with the Democratic Party. But when it comes to the money issues, the Democrats are doing to them exactly what the Republicans are doing to them. So this money shift that's going to take place out of McCutcheon is really kind of an interesting it's an interesting complex, Lee.
Oh, no, that's exactly the dynamic. Look at the big news that came out yesterday out of California. That secret money group that was related to the Koch brothers, active in the California election last year, $11 million in secret money to fight Jerry Brown's tax plan and to push an initiative that basically helps big business bust the unions. We didn't know where the money was coming from, and the California regulators looked into this. They released a partial list, essentially, of some of the donors, and you look through, it's not just the Koch brothers. It's not just these big Republican donors. It's a bunch of these big Democratic millionaires.
It's Wall Street. Yeah, it's Wall Street.
They're Democratic hedge fund managers. It's Eli Broad, big Democratic donor, but, he doesn't like the unions, and he doesn't like seeing his taxes very marginally increase.
Yeah, and he doesn't like, and some of them have enough sense that they don't want to be associated with the Honey Boo Boo Duck Dynasty Party, which is the teabag Republican Party. So they say, well, I at least got to put my money on something that I'm not embarrassed when I walk into, to a room about being a Tea Party Republican. So I'm going to give it to a Democrat, but the Democrat's going to be a very special kind of Democrat. It's going to be a Schumer kind of Democrat, you see. It's going to be a Dick Durbin kind of Democrat that really is there for us.
Look at the super PACs, the Bloomberg money that's flowing into elections all over the country. It's bipartisan, right? It's going and helping to elect certain Republicans and certain Democrats. But it's along those lines that you're speaking of. It's socially progressive, but on core economic issues, on economic liberty, on being able to have time with your family and join a union and not discriminate at your job economically.
Yeah, they're losing. Lee, what is that? You followed both sides of this. What's the difference between what the Republicans did on social issues with the Southern Baptist, the Southern Baptist types in the South? There was no difference. They scared the hell out of them on social issues like race and gender. And so on the other side of that, you have the Democrats saying, look, we're with you, Democrat, on social issues, and then the media never talks about the fact, but look what they did to you where it comes to putting food on your table for your family. Look what they did to you where it comes to you having any rights to have a pension program that's protected. Look what they did to you on your right to be able to organize a labor union. They killed us. And so it's really the reverse of what we saw this last time, and it's almost like nobody's talking about that. I wish you'd write it. I know you've written about this. I wish you'd spend some time exploring that, Lee, because I can't think of anybody who could do a better job with it. It's,
Well, thank you, Mike. That's very kind of you. But you're describing an interesting dynamic, and you see a lot of these corporate interests positioning themselves for the next movement. A lot of them, I think. And they're being very insincere, but they're embracing a lot of these cultural concerns with privacy, with the NSA, but they don't really care about that. They just see that as the next kind of ideological way that they want to capture, because they'd like candidates to run against the government. They'd like candidates that are against big government, against big unions. And you look at some of these libertarian-style Democrats that are now running around the country, receiving a lot of funds from big business, from these wealthy donors. They're self-styled independents, but if you look closely at their record, they're very close to big business, and they're not promoting something actually new and genuine.
Time for a Workers' Party, Lee. Thanks for joining me, okay? Great work as usual. We need to watch this McCutcheon case. It is an ugly thing happening with that majority in the Supreme Court that is owned. They were paid for, they were bought, they were financed, they were groomed by not just the Republican right wing, but also by the Democratic right wing. When did we ever think we would say the Democratic right wing? But I feel very comfortable saying it right now. Thank you for joining me. That's it for this week's Ring of Fire, but you can keep up with us throughout the week online at ringoffireradio.com or on Twitter at Ring of Fire Radio and on Facebook. I'm Mike Papantonio, and we'll see you next week right here on Ring of Fire.